Hello there, everybody, and welcome into the Sencha Cafe again. And this is Stephen Ball, and let's just make sure we've got Stuart as the presenter there. Joining me online, as always, for the Sencha Cafe is Stuart. Hi, Stuart.
Morning, Stephen. Hi, everybody.
And this week we're going to be having a look through at kind of end-to-end testing of Sencha applications, and there's a few different options for doing this, and obviously there's things like Sencha Test, which is well integrated with the Sencha framework, but also another option that we've seen people use where they've got kind of corporate policies around using specific platforms. Recently we've seen quite a bit around Playwright, so Stuart's going to be covering that through today. But before we get going, just as always, a few quick poll questions to get us started off. And specifically on topic for this week, what testing platform are you using, or how are you doing your tests of your application at the moment? Now, this is a multiple choice. It may be that you're kind of testing manually, something that's quite popular during the development cycle, but at the point that you're ready to kind of push this through towards production, really, are you relying on manual testing, or are you looking at using some automated testing frameworks like Sencha Test, Playwright, Siesta, or maybe something else like Cypress or Puppeteer? Now, if you're putting something in the other, it'd be great if you want to use the GoToWebinar chat just to be able to send us a message to let us know what you are actually using. So quite a big spike for manual testing, just over 80%, 25% of you using one of the other options. So a good spread. Okay, thanks for that. Also going to just quickly check into which versions of Sencha you guys are currently using. Sorry, that's the next one. What describes your usage of Sencha at the moment? Are you not using it yet? Are you actively trialing it, using it in development, or using it in development and production? So a good number of you using it in development and production, but also just over 20% of you looking into Sencha and trialing it at the moment, and getting going. So that's great to see. So if you are getting started along your journey with Sencha, feel free to reach through to either myself or Patricia, and more than happy to try and get you connected up with some of Stuart's time to talk about your project, to help point you in the right direction. It's one of the things that we love hearing about, is what you guys are doing and what you're trying to create. And we've got a lot of wealth of experience around different projects that are being run, so always happy to share that and help point you in the right direction. Okay, we're just going to close that one there. Yeah, so just under 70% of you using it in development and production, and then a pretty good spread across the rest of those options. So which version of Sencha are you currently using? And yeah, quite a lot of you on Sencha 7, good number on Sencha 6 still. Obviously about 20% of you guys not using it yet, which correlates with what we've just been asking. And about 4% of you still using Sencha 5. So yeah, good time to kind of get upgraded. Now there is it's end of our group financial year, actually today. So if you are looking to upgrade, I know there's some pretty good offers, about 25% off. So if you're interested, please let me know through the chat, and we can always try and get you connected with a salesperson today if that's something that is of interest to you. Okay. So yeah, I'll share that one up there. Quite a lot of you on Sencha 7, a few on Sencha 6, and a good number of you just getting in and going. Okay, I think that's the main questions to kind of get you going with today, Stuart. Did you need to know about the the different frameworks, if they're using Classic or the modern toolkit, or are you okay for that one?
No, I think that's all right today. I think we can miss that one over.
Okay, great. Well, over to Stuart. Say, always please use the chat panel to put your messages through, and we'll be doing the live Q&A as the questions come up and at the end.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Welcome everyone this morning. As Stephen said, we're going to have a session today about testing ExtJS applications. I'm particularly going to focus on Playwright, which is a fairly new tool in the testing world. I think it's backed by Microsoft and is kind of a spawn of the original Puppeteer team, which was developed a few years ago. So we're going to get stuck into that and do some demos and things with that framework. So a little bit about me. I've been working with Sencha for a long time now, and as part of the MVP team since it started, pretty much. If you need to contact me, my URL is there. You can get me by email from that web page. Any questions, whatever, feel free to shout. So the session today, we're going to give a bit overview of Playwright. Obviously, Sencha Test is a big part of the Sencha ecosystem, so we're going to talk a bit about that and how it compares with Playwright, and maybe why you would choose one over the other, and maybe talk a little bit about a couple of the other platforms as well. And then we're going to jump into a demo of setting up Playwright in our sample application that we've been building over the last a couple of months, and then we're going to write a couple of tests, and we're going to show some of the features and the tools that are part of the Playwright test setup. And then, as Stephen said, we've got time at the end for questions and answers. If there's anything that comes up during the while we're talking, fire them into the webinar software, and we can either get to them while we're talking or come back to them at the end, and hopefully we'll have some answers for everything that comes up. So first of all, what is Playwright? So this is taken from their website. So it's a framework for web testing and automation, and it allows cross-platform, cross-browser testing, sort of tightly integrated with the Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit platforms with a single API. And the sort of headline is that it's evergreen, capable, reliable, and fast. And so that's their sort of description of the tool, and it's a really good tool for testing web platforms that are running the browser. So that's why it's perfect for ExtJS applications, along with any other applications that you run in the browser. So some of the key features and benefits of Playwright. So it takes a slightly different approach to some of the tools that came previously. So it uses the Chrome DevTools protocol, which is a new protocol which has been sort of quickly integrated into all the browsers, partly by the Playwright team, which submitted patches to each of the browsers that didn't support it, so that it can communicate directly with the browser. So it kind of communicates at a sort of lower level than some of the other tools which sort of perform, sort of drive the browser rather than integrate tightly with it. So with that technology that it uses, it supports all modern browsers, but also the drawback is that it doesn't support sort of legacy browsers. So if you need to do testing further, back in time in the browser world, then this tool maybe isn't suitable for your use case, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. One of the other key benefits that it touts is it's got sort of intelligent auto weighting. So a lot of the time when you're doing automated testing, when we do it manually, we wait for elements to appear on the page, we wait for a request to finish and that sort of thing, and often the automated testers try to do things too fast, and so they try and click where the button hasn't appeared yet, or that sort of thing. So Playwright kind of has this intelligence, which it has a bit various criteria for auto waiting for things to appear, and supposedly that will reduce flakiness in the tests. So there'll be less sort of it passes and then it fails, or it fails and then you retry and then it passes again. So that's something that's really useful in getting sort of consistent, less flaky tests. Another big feature is that it's got sort of lower level network control, so we can intercept network requests and we can mock them all, as part of the Playwright API. And we can also simulate file uploads and downloads, which is really useful when you're, dealing with data-heavy web applications, which require, if there's export features, or you need to upload documents into a grid or something like that. So Playwright lets you simulate those and pick real files from your file system and have them uploaded into your application and handled as they would in real life scenario. The other big thing is this browser context that it can handle. We can simulate things like incognito mode, and we can also maintain sessions across multiple tabs, which has always been harder in the past. And that means we can if we've got applications which work across tabs and sort of maintain their sessions across that, and you're kind of working between them as you browse the application and go into different pieces that maybe open in new tabs, that lets us maintain the session and have things more complete test coverage, because you can work with these features in your application. So that's really useful. And because we're using the sort of lower level protocol, we're able to integrate with the browser permissions and settings, so we can simulate browser features being turned on and off. So we can see how our application handles, for example, if notifications are turned off, what does it do? Does it break, or does it show an in-browser notification, or what does it do? Similarly with things like geolocation and that sort of thing, we can get a proper test of our application in different scenarios where users, the ideal scenario is the users have geolocation turned on, but often they won't, or they'll reject the permissions. So we need to be able to handle that and be able to test how that how that is handled and how the application reacts. So that's a really good feature. And similarly, we can dive into the user settings that might be applied to the browser. So things like dark mode and the print setup, see how the application works when it's being printed, that sort of thing. So a wee bit lower level control over the environment that the test is taking place in. Another good benefit, I know we're likely all JavaScript developers here, but Playwright has multi-language support with a single API, so you can write your tests in JavaScript and TypeScript in C#, Python, or Java, and if they all use a similar API and run the same underlying platform. So that's useful if you've got multi-language projects in your team. It also has some code generation tools, so we can load up our application and sort of record scenarios through this tool, and that will give us a jump start on writing our tests. Obviously, the tests that are generated are maybe never quite right, but it gives us a starting place and does a bit of legwork for you, and you can then modify the code that it outputs and create a full test with it, with what was recorded. So that's really useful. And similarly to the different platforms, we can do some device emulation, so we can test across different devices, viewport sizes, and that sort of thing, and make sure our application is robust across all the platforms. So those are the key features of Playwright. A lot of good benefits there. Not of them aren't exclusive to Playwright, and the other platforms support similar things. But there's a few interesting new things that it's bringing to the table over the other platforms. So talking about other platforms, Sencha has its own testing platform called Sencha Test. There's lots of good details on the website, the Sencha website, about this tool. There's a couple listed in the slides at the end, so we can share that. So how does this compare with Playwright? So Sencha Test is a bit more of a unified testing studio. There's a full GUI interface for browsing your tests, creating new ones, recording new ones. It's all very integrated, and is a good studio for building tests as either a QA team member or a developer team member. So there's different scenarios that you can go down when using the tool for your particular role, and it's really good unified system for creating tests and running tests as well. And obviously, because it's built by Sencha, it's got very close integration with the ExtJS framework, so we can interact or set up the automated tool to interact with the application at a much more ExtJS level, if you know what I mean. So we have close integration for selecting components, for interacting with components, checking the state of components, that sort of thing. So it's very, very geared towards handling ExtJS applications and the components within them. So checking that the text of a button is correct is a lot more easy. It's a lot easier because we can access the methods that are part of the button class, and so that sort of thing. So that gives us a really that's an important thing when you're working with ExtJS applications. That's a big benefit of Sencha Test. As we said before, Playwright is based on this new protocol, which means it's more geared towards using it in modern browsers. So, but Sencha Test uses WebDriver, which gives us access to a different range of browsers, a wider range, and back to into the IE Internet Explorer versions. So if you've got a requirement to support those versions of the browsers, then Sencha Test has a bit of a better range of browsers, because it uses different technology to run the tests. So if you're just focusing on modern browsers, then you can Playwright will be a better option. But if you need to use that sort of legacy browser, then Sencha Test has that covered. It's also got a very comprehensive test recorder. Playwright has the code gen tool, but as I said, because Sencha Test integrates so well with the ExtJS framework, the test recorder is geared to recording things with an ExtJS mindset, if you like. So when you click a button, it looks for the ExtJS selector, if you like, to select that button. So it might use the component query or the item ID that the button has, whereas in Playwright it just looks at CSS or XPath selector. So it looks for CSS class names, that sort of thing, to identify the component, whereas ExtJS Focus One can be a bit more detailed with the component that it's actually representing. And lastly, it's got good integrations with other tools. We can integrate it with Jira, so it creates tickets when tests fail. We've got code coverage with Istanbul, and integrations with CI platforms like TeamCity and Jenkins. Obviously, Playwright can be set up to do that as well, but it's maybe a little bit more work to bring in third-party packages and things to do that. But these are things that are built in the Sencha Test. So they're both very good tools. There's definitely a decision to make when you choose. Some projects will be more suited to Playwright platform, some with more suited to Sencha Test. So in this session, I just want to give you a wee introduction to Playwright and see how it might be used to test an ExtJS application. Although it'll be very generic to any type of application, really. And we can see the good things, the bad things, and you can make a decision if you want to build an automated testing tool into your projects. So now we're going to jump into a quick demo, and we'll see how this all works. So let's move this over. So this is our little application we've been building. We're going to use this as the focus of our testing. We're just going to do a couple of little tests to test that you can click on a row and view a message and go back again. So we're not going to do too many in detail tests, more just to show the platform in action and see some of the features that it has. So we've got a VS Code window here with our project. I've got, this is running the Sencha's open tooling. So we've got the dev platform running here in this console window, which is powering this browser here. So we'll create a new terminal window to run our new Playwright tests in. So just a quick description of Playwright's structure. So you can run Playwright in two different ways. So Playwright has a sort of underlying library, which is the sort of core of the tool, which is really about driving the web application and driving the interaction to test. So you can use Playwright as a sort of automated tool, not necessarily testing, but say to drive a website to scrape some data from a page or perform automated tasks, automatable tasks quickly. So sort of outside of the testing realm. So that's the sort of core library, and then on top of that, they have Playwright Test, which is the sort of test runner built on top of the automation core package, and then it adds in the layers of handling different test bundles, and the assertions and that sort of thing. So that's the main two packages that exist. Inside Playwright Test, it uses Jest's expect assertion library. So that's the library that's used to determine if things are right or wrong in the application. So you're testing that elements exist, elements don't exist, the URLs change, that sort of thing. That's done by the expect assertion library, and I think all these things are pluggable, so you can switch them out if you want to use a different library in place of the sort of defaults. And similarly, it has various different reporters built in. So that's how we sort of see the output of the test run. So there's things like where it just gives you a line for each test that's complete, whether it's passed or failed. There's like a dot one where it just gives you a dot or a cross if it's passed or failed, or there's full HTML output, which we'll see, or we can have a bit more low level things like JSON or JUnit XML output as well. And also, so you can support things, third-party ones like Allure, which you can bring in as a plugin and get the output that way if that's how you want to display it. Because obviously we need to do these test runs and be able to consume the output in some way, whether it's to fail a CI build or just to publish the results so developers can go in and fix any failures. So to get started, we can use an npm command. We use npm init, and we want to init Playwright at latest, and that will bring in the latest Playwright package and initialize it in our application, add it to the dependencies list, and it'll give us some options for creating our test part of our project. So go ahead and hit that. So do you want to use TypeScript or JavaScript? We're just going to use JavaScript now, keep it simple. And where do we want to put our tests? So let's suggest in a test folder. That seems fine to me, so we'll just hit OK. Do we want to add a GitHub Actions workflow? Not just now. And now it will start installing the project. So you can see here that it's basically doing npm install of the Playwright test runner platform and adding that to our dev dependencies. It's updating the package.json, giving us this Playwright config file, which is important, what we'll talk about in a minute. And it's generated a sort of sample tests spec, which we can go and look through. And it gives us a bunch of commands that we can run to actually activate our tests and run them. So first of all, excuse me, we can just run the test. So we just use this npx command, which initiates the Playwright package, and it's got the test command will just run all the tests it finds. Obviously, we've got lots of tests in the example file, none of which will pass, I don't think, because it's going to run against it's running against a to-do app. I can't remember if it runs a remote version of it, but you can see it's running through lots of tests and very quickly. And so, okay, we've got 75 tests passed. It must be hitting a remote web page. So let's open this up and we'll see. Okay, so it goes to demo Playwright to do MVC. So that's actually running real tests. And if we can see it running if we pass in the head full option. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong. Headed, sorry. Headed. We actually see it open the browser and see it doing all these tests. very quickly. So you see it loading up the application, you can see it flashing some to-do application interactions there. So you see it's really fast, and we can watch it do its process if we want to. So we'll just kill that just now because that's managed to watch it all. And then we've got the show report option, which allows us to see the output of the last test run. So we can paste that in here, and it'll open a browser, and we can see all the names of the tests that it's run. You see the platform that it ran on. So these are 3 identical tests that run on 3 different platforms: Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit. And we can open up each one and see the steps that it's carried out. And if any had failed, we could see them there and see details of that. And we'll show some of that later when we'll trigger some failures on purpose. So that's a quick showing how we can run the test and see the output on those example tests. So before we go any further, we'll just dive into the playwright.config file. So this is quite a detailed file, and it gives you lots of options out the gate, which you can either tweak or remove if you want. So it's basically just an object with key value pairs for different settings that can be set up. Some key ones that might be of interest. So we've got timeout values here, which say, if you're asking the test to wait for an element to appear, you can set this value to be, how long will it wait until it says, right, it's not going to appear, I'll fail this test. So this is set to 5,000 for the expect calls, and then there's a more global timeout for each test as 30 seconds. So you might find that 5 seconds is a long time to wait when you know that if the element hasn't appeared yet, it's never going to appear, if you know what I mean. So if you click on a button and the window never appears after half a second, then you know it's not going to appear because there's nothing else running that's going to slow it down. So you might want to make that 1 second, and that'll speed up your tests by stop a failing test waiting for 5 seconds each. So there's some control there you can add. If you want if a test fails, you want to retry it, you can tell it to retry X number of times. And we'll talk about the retries later. So that's quite good for, it sort of highlights flaky tests. If it fails, then you retry and it passes, that'll kind of get flagged up as a flaky test, in which case you might want to look at how it's implemented or what's going on underneath to see why sometimes it passes and sometimes it fails. And the workers allows us to run tests in parallel. So you might want to, on this setup, it's saying if it's on CI, then don't do any of them in parallel, only use one worker. But we can set this to use as many as we want to try and get to increase the speed of the test runs. And we mentioned reporters earlier, so by default we're using the HTML one, and that's how we get this nice output in the browser. So we could change that to the line one or the dots or the JUnit output. There's lots of options there. And here's this use option. We've got this trace, which is quite interesting, and we'll talk about that as well. That lets us view a sort of rerun of the test to see if we can investigate why maybe it failed. So if this is set on the first retry, so if a test failed, it will do a retry, and if that fails, then it'll store a trace of that test run, so you can go back and look through and see why it failed. So that's a really useful thing, just to see what's happened during the test and why it might have failed. And there might be something on screen that you weren't expecting, or your selector wasn't quite right because it matched a couple of things. That sort of thing lets you just go a bit deeper into the test run and see exactly what's going wrong. And finally, one of the main things is this projects config, which lets us set up the different profiles effectively for running the tests. So in this case, it's got 3 different profiles for Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. And that's where we saw the little tags on each of the test runs. So that will run the full test suite on each of these projects by default. And they've got some other ones that we can add in mobile Chrome, mobile Safari with an iPhone or Pixel profile. So we can make use of those if we want to expand our test platform use. So those are the main configs. There's obviously probably a lot more that aren't added in by default, but we can see the sort of control that we have over our test suite and how we can customize things to work as we want to. So that's the config file. That gets added automatically when we did that init. And we can add any extra configs in there that we want just to customize things. So we will go back now and write our first test. So we can see our example file here, which we can open up. Let's just see a bit of the structure that we've got. So we import the test package and the expect package. That's the jest expect library that we talked about. And then we can add before each hook. So we've got all these different hooks that you might be familiar with from other packages. There's sort of before each, before all, after each, after all, just to do some preliminary code that we want to do before every test. So in this case, before every test, we want to open a page and go to the URL here so that we can actually run the test. You could put this in the beginning of every test, but that's, it's a bit of duplication, so we can use this before each. And each of these, the tests and these hooks, they take an async function. Generally, everything that you do in the test is async, so we can use the await keyword so that we do the action and wait for it to confirm that it's been done before we move on to the next one. Otherwise, things go too fast and the setup hasn't been done yet. So there's a few different things, but the main parameter here is page, which is destructured from the single parameter, and that is the representation of the page that we're on. So we're calling page.goto. It's just going to take the browser to that URL, and then we can act on it. So in this case, we've got a global variable with some test data, and then we can use our test.describe, which is just a way to group the tests together. So this is describing a new to-do set of tests, and then we have each of these as a test block where we give it a wee description, and again an async function which passes the page in and lets us do our test steps on it. So in this case, it uses the locator function, which is a way to grab elements on the page. So it's grabbing the new to do class, which is a button, I believe, or a form, and it's filling it in with the item here and then pressing enter. So stepping through that, adding a to do process, and then so it adds another one here, and then it does some checks to make sure things were added as expected. So we're grabbing labels within the view class, and we expect them to have text that matches the two that we added. And then it also does a check with a utility function that we've got to check that the local storage is populated as expected. So very simple test. We're going to do a similar thing for our application now. So let's make a new file, and we'll call it view message .spec. Oops, so JS. And because it's in the test folder, it'll get picked up automatically by the by Playwright based on its selector, because we've told it to look for tests inside the test folder, so it'll find it automatically. So the first thing we need to do is we need to import the two libraries. So we've got the test and expect, because we're going to do some checks. Some checks on whether the elements are there or not, and we're going to go similar to the example. We're going to go in the before each step. We're going to go to our local page. So this might be in real life, you might be pointing to a QA server or a staging server or something, but in this case, we're just going to hit our local instance that's running our application. So we're going to create a describe block. Just call it view message, and again passes an async function, and then we create our first test, and we're going to call it should allow me to view a message, and we've got a suffix because we're going to do a few different steps here. We're using built-in selectors now, which is default setup for Playwright. So first of all, we want to check that our application is in the correct state. So we want to check that the grid is visible and our message viewer, our message reader is not visible. So to do that, we're going to add two expects and use a selector here. So we're going to target the message grid, which is a class, a CSS class that we've added to the grid just for styling purposes. So we're going to use that as a hook to find the grid component. And because it's hidden with the hidden offsets class, we're going to check that the message grid doesn't have that class and it has a count of 1. So we use that selector and we expect there to be 1 item there. So if the message grid was hidden and it had that class, then that would be 0 because it wouldn't find any. And we're doing the inverse for the message reader. Again, we've got a hook class that we can use here, and it will have the hidden offsets. And we should expect that to have one item. So next, we're going to create a quick utility function that's going to click one of the items in our list and trigger a switch. So we're just going to add that at the bottom so we can use it in future tests. So we've called it view message. It's an async function, and we're going to pass in the page object so that we can access the page and interact with it. And then we're going to pass in a string, which is going to be the subject, a wee snippet of the subject that we want to select. So we might pass in one of these subject name values just to target that row in particular. So again, we're going to use page.locator, which is the sort of main function that you'll probably use. And we're going to try and target that row on the page. So we look for the message grid. So we want to be searching inside the message grid. We're going to grab the xgrid cell inner, which is the sort of inner class wrapped around the grid's cell. And then we're going to use a special Playwright function called hasText, which says look for a grid cell inner element that has the subject snippet text within it somewhere in the chain. So it might not be that child that has it, but it might be a more lower down child. But that text needs to be in the elements somewhere. And then it's going to call interaction, it's going to call .click, and that will trigger our interaction and move us from the list view to the details view. So that's easy enough. So we're going to call it await, and we're going to call the view message, pass in the page and our little snippet, which we'll grab the first one, which is lorem ipsum nonsense, morbid keys. And then, so that should move us to the next page. So the next part of the test, we want to check that the interaction happened as we expected it to. So what do we expect to happen? We expect the message grid to disappear and be replaced by the reader view. So we basically want to do the inverse of what we've done here. So we can grab, I'll just paste this in because there's a lot of typing. So we've flipped these around. So we've got message grid should have the hidden offsets class, and that should have a count of 1. And the message reader should not have the hidden offsets class, and that should have a count of 1 as well. So that'll check that those have flipped around. And also when we click the item, we also see that URL changes, because we added that in one of the previous sessions, if you want to go back and look at how we did that. So let's check that the URL changes as well. So what we can do is grab the URL from the page object, and that will return localhost 1962 view/5. And we want that URL to have to match the pattern at the end. So we want it to be view/ and then 1 or more digits at the end. And that will do that check. And hopefully that means that we'll have our our application will move page and also do it through the routing setup. And lastly, we want to just check that the reader actually is displaying the correct text. So let's add another locator. So we want to find the message reader subject element, which is this one here. And we want to check that it has the text that we expect it to have. So this text here. So we could put that into a variable here so we don't duplicate it. But so we'll select that element, and we expect it to have one element that matches. And you might want to go further and add, check that the sender name is correct and the body is correct and all that sort of thing, but we'll just keep it simple just now. So now with that in place, we can go back to our terminal, and I'm going to just delete the example one so that we don't have that running as well. So if we do it headed, we can see it happen very quickly. It might be a bit of a flash if you see it over here. Bit too quick to even see. So 3 passed because it ran the same test 3 times in the different profiles in Firefox, Chrome and WebKit. But we could also say we only want to do it in Chromium. So we could say profile equals Chromium. Oh, unknown option. Let's try and remember what it is. Project, sorry, not profile. I'm thinking in ExtJS land. Project. So 1 test using 1 browser, 1 worker. So we've got 1 test and 1 test passed, and we can open up the report, and we see our test, and we see all the steps we added, all the specs. We can see where they, the code that triggered them, and get all details about what's happened. So that's really good, dead easy to implement. So we can expand that sort of pattern to all sorts of other tests. We can trigger the buttons. Do the messages get marked as unread? Do they get deleted? That sort of thing. Really easy to go through. So what I would like to do now is make the test break and see what happens to the output when you do that. So what we'll do is we'll go into our app. I believe in the main controller, we can just turn off the view message. So on view message, this is where it does the redirects. Let's just return here. So let's basically tell the application don't do the action and let the test fail. So let's run it again. You might be able to see if we're quick. So it's clicked the row, nothing's happening. It's doing that 5-second wait. As you can see here, with timeout 5,000 milliseconds, it's waiting for that change to happen, but it hasn't happened. So when it fails, we get this report opens up automatically, and we can investigate what's happened, and it will give us the the expect failure, what it expected, what it received, and some details about where it happened. So that's how we might review what went wrong. And we talked about before about retries. So let's add a retry into this. So at the moment we've got retries set to 0. So let's put it on to retries 1, and that will bring this trace into play, because it will do a retry and then it'll trace if it fails. And obviously this isn't a flaky test. We know this is going to fail. So let's just kick it off and make it fail. Wait for 5 seconds. And there's trying again. And it's still going to fail. So now we get our run, and we also get this extra tab called retry number 1. So this will stack up if we had lots of retries. And as well as the errors and the steps that failed, we get this trace part at the bottom, which we can click into, and that will open, well, it'll download the trace, which we can actually view here. So we get this message here where we can just paste this in here rather than go into the thing. So we can do npx playwright show trace, and it's got this path to where the trace is. And that zip file just has all the details of what happened during the test. So we can see the new page being created. We've got our go to the URL, and now this is what the page looked like when this expect happened, which passed. And now we get through here and we can see the little dot for where the click happened, and now we're waiting, and that's the one that failed. So in this case, we can browse through the timeline of the test and see what might have went wrong. Obviously in this case it's dead simple, but in more advanced cases maybe a pop-up popped up and you weren't expecting that and it blocked the interaction, something like that. So you actually get a visual look at what's going on in the page. So that's a really useful tool that we can make use of when the tests fail. So what we've got 15 minutes left. So I want to redo our test and make it a little bit more ExtJS specific. So obviously before we were just, let's make our app work again, take that away. So the moment we are using CSS selectors to grab our elements, and it just so happened that we have some hook CSS classes in there which lets us grab those elements. But it would be nicer if we could, maybe emulate Sencha test a little bit and be able to use component queries to grab our elements. So Playwright has the ability to add custom selector engines where we can give our own syntax and back the selector with our own code to fill in the gaps and try and pick out elements from the page by ourselves. So with that premise, we can build our own engine to select things based on component queries. So we just have this, I'll just paste in this example here. So this is a function that returns an object. I stop formatting. And it's got a query function and a query all function, and that basically is used, and when it matches this query syntax that we're going to give it, it matches one of these, whether it's going to directly select one element or multiple, and it runs that code based on with the selector, and then it handles whatever comes back, puts it into the selection process, and then uses that set as the input for the next set of selectors. So let's make this a bit wider so we can see everything. So we're going to get a selector here, which we're going to assume is a component query. This is really pretty rough, not very robust and everything. So take it with as a demonstration and not throw it into our production app. But the premise is solid in terms of it actually working. Obviously, you can do some checks and things to make sure it's all working properly. So we've taken our selector and we pass it into the x.component query.query, and then we grab the first item and we grab its element and we grab its DOM element and return that to the engine to be used in the next selection process. So obviously the selector might not match anything, in which this case this is going to throw all sorts of errors. But as a demo, we're using proper matching selectors. So we're going to perform this query selection with the component query, and then we're going to grab the element or the component that it represents, and then the DOM element to be used in the clicks or fill-ins and that sort of thing. And just like the one above, the query all, we're going to grab the full query and it'll return us an array of components, and then we're just going to map those down to their DOM, the raw DOM elements, and return those. So, and then just to finalize that, we need to actually register it with Playwright so it knows it can use it. And we're just going to add that in to the before each. And I'll just show you how that works. So again, we use the await and selectors.register, and we're going to use this CQ syntax as the sort of hook to tell it we're using our component query engine here and use the selector and put it into this engine rather than in the CSS selector engine. So that's our little tag, and we pass in that function, which will return our query logic. So now we can rewrite this. We can rewrite this test a little bit differently. So rather than using this messages grid, CSS syntax, we can write a different selector. So let's write a message grid hidden selector here. We're going to reuse it, so we'll define it as a string. So we're going to use our CQ syntax, which tells the engine that it's using our custom one. And we're going to use messages-message grid, which is an X type that we're using in our app. And then we're going to say we want to select it when it's hidden. So we use the not syntax and :visible. And that will say find all the message grids that aren't visible. And that will return the element that the DOM element that is represented by that component. And we're going to do the same for the message reader. We'll create another variable here. So that one is called, the X type is called reader-message reader. And now we can use these selectors in place of this. So we say the message hidden grid should be 0 because we expect that to not exist because the message grid is actually visible. And we want to replace this one with the message reader. Oh, take off that one, and that will have 1 because we expect there to be a reader that is hidden. We leave the rest the same, and then we just do the inverse at the bottom here. So we expect message grid to be hidden, so we should have a count of 1, and we expect the reader to be visible, so the hidden count will be 0. And then we can leave everything else as is, apart from this here. So we're still using the message reader class here, but we want to be able to select the component itself. So this is a good opportunity to show how we can sort of combine these two together. So I'll just paste in the full thing and we'll explain it. Oops. That's wrong. This one. So we've got our CQ syntax. So let's match a single message reader component. And then we use this double arrow syntax to combine it with a regular CSS selector. So this is going to grab the message reader DOM element, and then we want to continue to match with this selector too. So that lets us chain them together and combine the two worlds of component query and CSS selectors. And so that will let us check for the subject being populated correctly. And lastly, down here, we've got our message grid still, so we can update that one to use the CQ syntax and the chaining. And just like that, so CQ messages-message grid, and chain it with the grid cell selector to do the click. So let's rerun this test. Fingers crossed, that actually works. Let me open up. If you have very quick eyes, you see it flash on and that it worked. And we've got our green one passed. So now we can see it using the CQ syntax. So that lets us, it's a small example of how we could adapt Playwright to be a little bit more ExtJS focused and let us interact with the page in using ExtJS terminology, with component queries, and access actual properties of the components itself, the visible there. And equally, we could expand this to have support for other things like checking different, we can check a getter perhaps. So we want to get message grids where the getter of a particular config is false or true or whatever, and really expand that out. So it's quite powerful potential for it. And either if you want to go down the normal CSS style selectors or into the ExtJS ones too. The next thing we want to do is quickly show we can do some visual testing too. So we can add a screenshot capture to this test. So say we want to be able to open the page, and then we want to be able to take a screenshot, and then the next test run we want to compare those two screenshots together so that we can capture any visual regressions that might have occurred. So we're going to do that quickly. We've got 5 minutes left. Got some time for questions. Not got through quite as much as I hoped, so maybe we can sneak over a little bit. So we can use this page.screenshot function, and we tell it that we want a 100% quality JPEG, and we expect that output to match this screenshot with a threshold of 0.3. So this is a variable one. Sometimes you get slight differences based on like the pixel rendering, and we give it a wee bit of leeway to allow a match still to happen. So that's all we need to add, and we can rerun our test. Excuse me. And the first run of this will fail, and that is because it doesn't have a test. It doesn't have a screenshot to match it to. So we'll see up here somewhere. So the .jpeg is missing, so it's going to actually write the first one. So that's a sort of fake fail. So we'll run it again. Now it's got a baseline to compare against. Now we get a pass. And if we do our report, we can view into here. Oh, I thought we could see the screenshots. Well, in a folder inside this page, we'll see our screenshots appear. So you can see this is the baseline screenshot. So let's make it fail quickly. And we'll grab our toolbar and we'll take away one of the buttons. So let's drop the archive button and let Sencha command get up to speed, and then we'll run our test. So now the pages will be very different because we're missing a button, and we'll see how that failure happens. So here we go. Here's our failure. We've got, it tells us the line that's failed, so it's a snapshot that's failed. And it gives us a visual diff here. So this is the actual, we can see that it's got the archive button missing. This is what we expect. We expected to have that archive button here, and then it gives us a wee diff. And it shows us, obviously the diff isn't as big as maybe we say because there's other buttons that take its place, but on the right we see that there's an extra button there, basically. And that highlighted diff is what's triggered the failure of the test. So that's really useful for catching visual regressions. If you're doing some big CSS changes, you want things to be, you know, the same on some pages. We can use this to do that. Finally, before we go, I've got one more couple of minutes left. Let's see if there's any. There's quite a few questions. I'll have a quick spy of the code generation tool, the test recorder. So cancel that, leave off a bit. So now we can use the npx to trigger the Playwright command, and we're going to use the code gen, and we want it to open up our page. So that's all we need to do. And that will open up a browser window with this recorder tool here. So we'll immediately recognize this structure as the one we made. So we've got a page go to, it's actually redirected to the home page. So now we can click in here and we can see what it's going to select. And so you can see it's picked up this locator. It's just done it by text, and it's done the click action, and then it's expected to have the page, the URL change. So it's done that for us already, and we can maybe do a back. And again, it's selected the button based on ID, which we know in ExtJS land is not the best way to do it because these IDs are dynamic. So what you get out of this recorder is maybe not what you really want to just run in your test suite, but you can use it as a starting place. So you can maybe change that locator to be, you know, target the buttons text or the buttons tooltip or whatever, and adapt these. But it gives us a starting place and gives a bit of the legwork for what to locate and what checks to do and that sort of thing. So we can then take this out. If we want to do it in different languages, we can swap it to Python or C#, or just Playwright test, and then we can just press copy, and we can come out and paste it into as a test in our suite and take it from there. So it's a useful tool. Not I think if you were doing if you're becoming quite adept at building the tests, you probably wouldn't use it very often, just because you end up having to tweak everything anyway. But as a starting place, you could, you know, it gives you the different steps, so you know that's the click on the row, so you could just modify that a little bit. and that sort of thing, and add in your checks afterwards. So I think that's just covered everything that I wanted to. Sorry for running awfully quickly at the end. If there's any questions, as I said before, stick them in the chat, and we can try and get to them.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thank
yeah.
you.
We've got one question here. I think you may have covered it through, but it might be worth just going back to. On line 17 of your test script, you had expect and then await was in the brackets.
Oh, this one here?
Yeah, that line there.
Yes.
So they're just trying to understand how
So I think maybe there should be an await there. The await inside here says that we want to wait for that URL return to happen, because that's an asynchronous function. It's going to dip into the page and grab the URL and come back, which might take time. So we can use that syntax to say, wait for that URL call before we move on to the next one. And then, as the commenter said, we should have an await at the front of that, so that we wait for that check to happen. Because we are not moving on, if we immediately did some other action and the URL changed, then that expect would probably fail, because it might happen out of sequence.
Okay.
But in this case, we've got away with
it. Okay, cool. Yeah, Daniel says, thanks again for the webinar. He had a question, how do you use Playwright to test ExtJS components, i.e. a rating widget?
So, I mean, basically just how we've done it. Hopefully, maybe that was posted before we went into the details.
Yeah, I think that was posted. Yeah, I think that's posted just before you went through some of the further bits.
Yeah, so as we kind of did that little demo with the custom query engine, which lets us, dip into XJS land out of just normal web land. So we can. This is certainly the starting point for bigger, more comprehensive, sort of suite of selectors and checkers and things. So you would just, to test a single XJS component, you would just start building up these tests. So you might click the 5 stars and you want to check that you've got 5 colored in star components instead of 5 uncolored in star components, that sort of thing. And use the selectors to do that, because basically all the testing is saying is find something on the page, click it, does something change, does something happen. So it's really just, can you find the right components? Can you check their state is correct after doing some action, and whether that's clicking or filling in. We didn't do any forms filling in, but there's similar helpers that just type in text and press keys that can be used to fill in forms. I know that's a big part of most XJS applications is data entry. So
this is in essence, it's UI testing rather than like a unit test that you'd run on your code.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is more end-to-end testing rather than unit testing.
Yeah. So hopefully, John, that answers your question, because he asked, where's my code? Where's my source? My code? Or we're just doing stuff in JavaScript here. So yeah, so the testing here is very much about the application usage and testing application usage, rather than kind of unit testing to make sure that when you put 2 values in to a method, you get a certain value back out the other end. And obviously, that's another form of testing that you might want to consider for your applications. Mark's asking about links for the recordings. We're working on trying to get those there. Basically, the delays being that we've had a problem with being able to post some updates onto the YouTube account. And we're just trying to get that resolved so we can get the bits posted all up there in one big bash. But I will make sure that I follow through to everybody who's registered for these sessions once we get the links up live with the full links for all the sessions. So I will get those out as soon as possible. Slightly off topic, but Matthias says, your machine is blazingly fast compared to mine. What are you running? And I think from the comments here, he's actually probably got something a little bit newer than you. He's got a MacBook 16, 16 gig with 2019 model, running Big Sur.
So this is an M1 Mac Mini with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and it's very fast. It happily runs all the front end stuff that I do. So I'd recommend it. I guess there's a new M1s out now which are even better. So it wasn't too expensive either, being a Mac Mini.
Okay, awesome. He said, right, that's it. I'm leaving him off to the Apple Store. Great. I'm just having a look. I think we've kind of caught most of the kind of key questions that people have asked through here, and certainly with a couple of them have kind of just preceded what you're going to show and demo through in bits. I hope that everybody's found that a really useful session, and we are kind of a little bit over time, so I'm going to wrap up. But I say, if you do have any questions, maybe John, just pop your details back up on the screen there for everybody.
Yeah.
Stuart. Feel free to message through to Stuart or to myself, stephen.ball@idera.com. Or you've got the registration links that come through from the GoToWebinar, and you just send an email back to me from one of those. We're going to be taking a couple of weeks break from Sencha Cafes as we're now kind of getting into kind of the Easter time. I know a lot of people are in, out and around, and it'll give us a chance to just kind of regroup and come up with some more interesting topics and bits to kind of pick into in the future. Again, if there is anything specifically that you'd like to see covered, then please feel free to just let us know. We're more than happy to kind of try and get those into the schedule in some way. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation and joining us through this season. Thank you again, Stuart, for the great content, and we'll look forward to seeing you back at some point in the future for some more Sencha Cafes. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Stuart.
Great, thanks a lot. See everyone soon.